In this video, I'd like to talk about the math question of the day for March 14th, 2023. And with this problem, we need to solve a proportion, this equation here, for the variable x. And to answer a question like this, since this is a rational equation, you will likely need at least Algebra 2, though you might also see this in a pre-calculus class. So at this point, go ahead and pause the video, see if you can work through this on your own, and when you're ready, we can go through this together. Now, assuming that you have attempted the problem, let's start working through it. And if you do have suggestions for future questions of the day, feel free to leave those as comments. Now, when solving proportions, many students will apply the technique of cross multiplying and then using division to solve for x. However, I tend to advise students against methods like that since it is often misapplied when students will just memorize a procedure like that. I've seen students apply cross multiplication and division in many different scenarios where it doesn't make sense. So be careful with just memorizing techniques. It's better to solve this using basic principles. And the general idea is that we need to notice x is in the denominator. So to get x out of that denominator, we will multiply both sides of this equation by x, since when we do that on the right-hand side, x divided by x, that's just equal to 1. So we can rewrite this as x multiplied by this radical expression here, this quotient, minus 2 root 3 over 2 plus root 3. And this is all equal to 2 minus the square root of 3. And the next step here is to get x by itself. But what we could do as an intermediate step is to simplify this denominator, essentially get the square root out of that denominator. And to do that, we would need to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of this radical expression. Or in other words, we need to multiply by 2 minus the square root of 3. Since the conjugate here, we just replace this plus sign with a negative. And if it was negative, we would replace it with a positive. But we're multiplying by 1, so it's not going to change anything. And we don't have to do it on the other side of the equation since, like I mentioned, we're just multiplying by 1 here. We're not changing anything. So let's simplify that. We would still have x, but let's start with this denominator. If we multiply these out, you might notice this is a difference of 2 squares. We get 2 times 2, which is 4. Then we get 2 times by negative root 3, so minus 2 root 3. And then we get 2 times by positive root 3, so plus 2 root 3. And those cancel each other out. Then we have root 3 multiplied by negative root 3. And root 3 multiplied by negative root 3 would simplify to this expression here, where we have the opposite of the square root of 3 squared. And the square root and the square will cancel each other out so that we just get back negative 3 here. So we have 4 minus 3 in that denominator. And you can see this simplifies nicely to just integers. And this will just be 1. But in this numerator here, we need to be a little bit more careful. We are distributing minus 2 root 3 times by 2. That's minus 4 root 3. And minus 2 root 3 times by minus root 3. That will be a positive number. We would still have the 2, but root 3 times by root 3 is just 3. So that will simplify to 6. This is all equal to 2 minus the square root of 3. And I do want to mention there are other methods to solving this. We could have taken a different approach here. So if we ignore this yellow part here, that step of multiplying top and bottom by the conjugate, we could have multiplied by the reciprocal of this on each side and then simplified our radical expression on the right. But I chose to simplify the radicals right away, and then we will solve for x. So let's make some room, and we can continue working through this. We can rewrite the x. We have minus 4 root 3 plus 6, and then all of that's divided by 1, so we don't have to write that. And then we have 2 minus root 3. Now, from here, we need to solve for x, so we can divide each side of this equation by this factor here, this minus 4 root 3 plus 6, or I'll write it with the whole number first and then the radical part second, but we're dividing each side of the equation by that. And on the left-hand side, these will cancel each other out. So that x is just 2 minus root 3 over 6 minus 4 root 3. And we could stop here. You can plug all of this into a calculator and get some decimal answer, but if we want to find an exact answer and simplify everything, we need to simplify this expression. We can multiply top and bottom by the conjugate again. So let's do that. Now the conjugate of this denominator will just be 6 plus 4 root 3, and we have to divide by that as well, so 6 plus 4 root 3. And in hindsight, it might have been better to multiply by the reciprocal of this first and then simplify these radicals. That might save a step of having to do this twice. But it's often hard to tell which way is the most efficient. So I encourage you, play around with these equations and experiment with different methods. Sometimes you'll find the fastest way, sometimes you'll take a longer route, but as long as you end up at the correct answer, that's what matters. So let's simplify this. We can start with this denominator since we have a difference of 2 squares, so that will simplify. 6 times 6, that's 36. And 6 times 4 root 3, that will be a positive number. But then we'll be subtracting 6 multiplied by negative 4 root 3. So those will cancel out. The middle terms in a difference of squares always cancel out. Then we have minus 4 root 3 multiplied by 4 root 3. So 4 times 4, actually minus 4 times 4 would be minus 16. And root 3 multiplied by root 3, the square roots cancel when you square them, and we just get 3 there. So we are multiplying by 3. And in this numerator, we use distribution. The 2 goes to both, and the minus root 3 goes to both. So 2 times 6, that is 12. 2 times 4 root 3, that is 8 root 3. And minus root 3 times 6, that's minus 6 root 3. And minus root 3 times 4 root 3, we would have minus 4, and then root 3 times root 3 we know is 3. So let's simplify everything and combine like terms. We would get 12 minus 12, that's just 0. And 8 root 3 minus 6 root 3, that's 2 root 3. And in our denominator, 36 minus 16 times 3, that's 48. So that will be a negative 12 in that denominator. And 2 divided by 12 is 1 over 6 if we simplify that. So our final answer for x should be minus root 3 all divided by 6. But this is what we think is the answer. To actually feel confident and know for certain this is the answer, we have to check this. So we think x is minus root 3 over 6, but let's actually check our work here. And it will be a bit tedious since we need to plug x into this equation and see if everything simplifies. But let's just plug it into this right-hand side and see if it simplifies to that left-hand side. So we have 2 minus root 3 all divided by minus root 3 over 6. And we can rationalize this. We can essentially get rid of this square root in the denominator by multiplying by the conjugate, which would just be positive root 3. And if we want, we can keep the 6 there as well, but it doesn't really matter. So let's just multiply by root 3 on the top and bottom just to simplify everything. And in the numerator, we get 2 root 3 minus root 3 times root 3, which is just 3. And in our denominator, minus root 3 times by root 3, that's minus 3, and we are dividing by 6. And notice that our denominator will simplify to minus 1/2, but we're dividing by a fraction, which is the same as multiplying by that fraction flipped over. So we are multiplying by negative 2. So this simplifies to minus 4 root 3 plus 6. And at this point, let's see if we can make the left-hand side equal to the same amount. We will take this expression and we need to rationalize this, but we actually already did that. We did that in the first step. We rationalized this expression, and notice we got minus 4 root 3 plus 6, which is exactly what we got on the right-hand side. So both sides matched up when we plugged in what we thought was our x value, this x value of minus the square root of 3 over 6. We plugged it in here, we got back something that made sense, which means that we can feel very confident this is in fact the correct answer.